Welcome Storytellers to Bound by Words. Today we're going to be going over 5 ways to write a better group cast. If that's something you think you can benefit from, make sure you hit the like button and also consider subscribing. If we haven't met yet, my name is Madii. I am a freelance editor, fantasy writer, and I actually do all of the screening and hiring for writers and editors for the ghostwriting company I work for. So I feel like I do get a lot of exposure to different types of writing and writing styles, and writing groups is something I think people either naturally do pretty well and they have a really good sense of when different characters should come in and out of the picture, or it's really rigid and done kind of poorly if I'm being overly polite. So here are 5 ways to instantly write a better group. And the first, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but it happens often, I see it all the time, is don't let your characters stay together. Don't. For any reason, really. Throughout the whole story, your characters should not just be a blob that move together. They should split up, either solo or in smaller groups, or they should be in some scenes and not in some scenes. If your characters are moving through the entire story together, unless your story is told in some specific setting where, like, they're on lockdown, they can't, like, I can't even justify that. If somebody's on lockdown in like a house or a building, like they would even split up then. But there are, I'm sure, many situations that you can come up with where the characters would be forced to be together. That's sort of a little bit different. What I'm talking about is generally in every fiction novel, especially fantasy, that's sort of my sweet spot of where I read and write, it is unrealistic for characters to be moving together as like a singular unit if you want them to be like different and distinguished characters. So if they are different points of view, if you want your main characters to stand out, and we're not really going to be talking a whole lot about voice today, but I will say that having your characters stay together and move from like one scene to the next and one activity to the next and one plot point to the next together in a bundle will without a doubt remove some of that uniqueness from them. You want your characters to stand out against each other. So that's sort of one flaw of doing that, but there are several, including missing out on amazing opportunities for tension. Tip 2 for writing a better group cast is do not let them all appear in the same important scenes. Now this is not the same as the first point, but it is very similar. There is a difference between groups that move together through the whole story and groups that sort of flow and come back and forth like they should, but then they're all still there for the important scenes. They're there when so-and-so dies, they're there when this rumor comes out, they're there whenever this event happens, and there are limited situations where that's reasonable. Of course, you're going to have some points where all of your characters are going to be together because that's the point of having a group cast. But if they're there for every important part, again, it like ruins the opportunity for tension or suspense. It also sort of, it feels very artificial and rigid. Even when people are close, even when they spend a whole lot of time together, they're gonna have important things that happen where not everyone is there. I have read books and it kind of pulls you sort of out of the story and you get a little bit confused when it's like, they woke up and they go out and they're like, everyone's already awake in the living room and everyone has a conversation with each other. Like, I don't know a situation where that would happen. If I would wake up and I would go out into the living room, like, even if I was the last one up and everyone else woke up before me, somebody would be in their bedroom, somebody would be in the shower, somebody would have run to the store for coffee. And even if we were all sitting in the living room together, one person has their headphones in, the other person's playing a video game, I might be only talking to 2 people in the group. So having like everyone show up to an important event and also having everyone like actively paying attention and being a part of those scenes is just really artificial and rigid. Like I said, of course, you're going to have instances where that does happen, but avoid having it happen all the time. I would even say avoid having it happen most of the time. I've had stories where I read where it's like these 2 people fell in love and they really sort of skimmed over the whole romance of them falling in love, and then all of a sudden like the boyfriend was just with the main group because he had been adopted into the group partway through the story. But it felt so weird, and in my mind I was thinking like, he doesn't even live close to them, and like, how did he get here? And like, they didn't stay the night, they just sort of like walked in together. Like, I had so many questions, and they were all sort of just surrounded around the fact that it felt a little too rigid, too unnatural. Tip number 3 to writing a better, stronger group cast is to let your characters pick favorites. We all know that friend groups are not equal weight, If I have 2 friends, we don't all like each other the same. We're not like a perfect like mesh. It's always 2 people get along better than other 2 people. Maybe in a group of 5, like one person doesn't actually like 2 of the people there, but they're closer to the other 2 people, so they show up anyway. There's definitely going to be a different dynamic between each of your characters. Let your characters pick favorites. Let them sort of display through their actions the things they consider, the things they talk about, who they're closer to and who they're not. If everyone is the same degree of closeness, it's not going to feel realistic, because almost never does that actually happen in real life. Even in situations where, like in high school, people go to class all day and they're together all day, and maybe they do homework together in the afternoon. Even then, the groups aren't usually equally weighted when it comes to like friendship and quality of friendship. You always have one person that's going to be there, like when you cry, you have one person who's going to be there who's ready to fight for you, and those dynamics are important. Going back to character voice, as we talked about earlier, that's going to be one of the things that really sets your characters apart from each other and makes them different, is where they show up and who they're really like vying for whenever they are there. So in a group of 5 people, you might have like they might all get along, you know, but you're gonna have a couple pairings that are closer. You're gonna have a couple pairings who maybe they don't really like each other, or maybe they like each other but something happened recently so they're upset at each other. You're gonna have that shift in dynamic. And I think a good storytelling tactic is to really evaluate your groups, and not only to let them pick favorites, but to also let the favorites shift over time and throughout the story. So an example of that is if you have like characters A, B, C, D, you know, like characters A and B might be close at the beginning of the story, but like as character B like gets a new job, changes like lives, I don't know, something happens to character B where they're not as free, you know, character A and C might become like really close for no reason. Maybe like out of the 4 characters, character A and D go through something traumatic together, so now they have these like secrets, or they have this closeness that'll bring them together in a way that they aren't with the rest of the group. There are an infinite number of scenarios where you can create better and closer relationships between like part of the group in contrast to the rest of the group. So definitely take advantage of that. And that leads us to tip number 4 in writing better groups, and that is to give some of them extra information. You know, that's where a lot of the tension and the suspense comes from in any story, in every book, every novel, is somebody knows something and somebody else doesn't. Whether like the reader, we know something and the characters don't, and that's what creates the tension, or maybe inside the story, 1 or 2 people know something and the other people don't. It's a race of, are they going to tell them or are they not? Are they going to get there in time? Are they going to do something about it? Like all of that sort of going on is what creates tension and suspense within the story and within the plot. That is one of the many downfalls that I mentioned in point 1 that you have from having your characters move together. You lose the opportunity to have people receive separate information. Something that I see often in this category, and it really marks a writer as amateur in my eyes, is if like a group of 5, we'll just keep using 5 because it's a number I used earlier, say 2 people in that group have some sort of extra information. They overheard a rumor, they overheard the plot, they got some sort of information that could really help the group with whatever the end goal is, or maybe they got sort of a warning of something that is coming to like dismantle their whole existence. So a lot of people, for some reason, will immediately have those 2 people run back and tell the rest of the group what's going on. And a lot of times, as a little sidebar, that comes with a decent amount of repetition, which we want to avoid. So if you do have a situation where that happens, try not to be repetitive. But in most cases, that's not going to happen like that. And there can be an infinite number of reasons why. Sometimes it's just there's not good timing. Sometimes it's like they need to tell everyone at once and everyone didn't get together at once, so they don't want to say anything yet because they're missing somebody. So it's not that they don't care, it's just little things get in the way. Also, people are forgetful and priorities change constantly. If one thing happens and then like to those 2 characters, and then the important thing happened that everybody needs to know that you know is vital to the story happens, and then another thing happened to those 2 characters, maybe that 3rd thing that happened sort of derailed their plans. Maybe it kept them from telling them. Maybe whenever they went back, they were like, what's most important right now is that we deal with this issue. And even though the bigger issue is bigger, it's not as like eminent. So there are a bunch of ways to really play with the giving of information in the story, the taking and the withholding of information in the story. And I think when it comes to group casts, it is something that is often overlooked or done sort of with a weak hand. So if you're ever looking to increase the tension, I think that's an easy way to do it in any story with any number of characters, but specifically with group characters, if you want to write a better group cast, you have to avoid giving everybody the same amount of information all the time. You have to give different characters different amounts of information so that not only does it feel natural and realistic, but it also creates the tension and suspense that will help keep your pacing correct and accurate. Tip number 5 on how to write a better group cast And this is something that I know is going to be a little bit bittersweet for some people. Some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. We always talk about how writers, we like hurt our characters, we break their legs, we ruin their lives, and a lot of people brag about that. But in my experience, a lot of people go really light on their characters. You want to create a story that gets somebody emotionally invested and worried, but at the same time, you know, everybody's friends, everyone's close, and not enough happens wrong. So specifically with group characters, thing number 5 that you can do to write a better group is to create suspicion and doubt and trust issues. You know, like even just blind trust or blind faith also will help in between characters of the group. Not the group against everybody else. Members of the group against each other, because that is human and realistic, and we're trying to write realistic characters. We're trying to write strong characters with unique voices. If in the group of 5 you have one person who's really optimistic, of course she's just going to trust that so-and-so, whatever they said, they're 100% right. In that same group of 5, you might have somebody who's just really closed or shut in, and they're not going to be so instantly trusting. And if they are, if everybody in the group trusts everybody all the time and there's no doubt, then it definitely strips away some unique character attributes from everybody else in the group. You're gonna have instances where somebody's gonna think, I think they're lying. And it doesn't have to be some big plot movement. It doesn't have to be some big point of like tension or suspense or action either. It could be something as small as whether or not somebody went through somebody else's phone, whether or not somebody lied about this thing that happened 5 years ago. Create the tension and suspense and doubt as your story moves forward continuously through, like, between the characters. You're gonna have times where they trust each other, you're gonna have times where they're not. You're gonna have times where, like, you know, they trust each other, they're working towards the same goal, they love each other, but at the, like, somebody did something to anger somebody else. It's just gonna happen. In the closest groups of friends, you're gonna have instances of bickering, you're gonna have instances of anger. And like, I go to trust a lot because I think that's one of the easier things to do, and it's definitely a great place to start, because a lot of people, they will trust their own judgment more than anybody else's. And I think that's just human nature, and that is natural. You're gonna make these judgments based on your own experiences, so you need to let your characters also make those judgments based on their own experiences. If somebody said one thing and they lied 5 times in a row, you know, like, of course, a year down the line when they start to say something similar, you're gonna be like, yeah, but last time this happened, like, you weren't being honest with me, so I like don't know that I trust you. But that doesn't have to come from a point of hate. It doesn't have to ruin the group. Those feelings of disdain or like distrust sort of strengthen the arc of the friendship or the arc of the relationship. And you know, they might not stay friends at the end, or they might get closer at the end. We don't really know yet until the story gets written. But what is important is that, like, those relationships have ups and downs. And if you don't give the characters those emotions towards each other, they're not going to experience those ups and downs. Now, ultimately, even though I said, like, this is a tip on how to write better groups, you know, create this internally, you know, the group against externally, you're also going to have times and places where no matter what everyone feels towards each other, they're going to be on the same page, either for or against like an external stressor in the story. That's not like a don't ever do that, do this instead. This is a we need to be doing this internal thing constantly, and the external sort of relationship with the group is going to happen sometimes. That's what makes them a group. But remember, you know, like, what is the external stressor, and is everybody on board, or are 3 out of the 5 people on board and the other 2 are literally just doing it because everybody else in the group wants to do it? Those kinds of emotions are going to immediately create a better and more realistic group cast. If anything I said today made you think about your own writing or group cast, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, and also consider subscribing. I post writing related content once a week. I also have weekly live streams. Right now we're doing Monday from 3 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. I do make the thumbnails like a month in advance, so if you're interested in live writing sprints and productivity together with the Bound by Words community, then you can go to my channel and check out what time we are currently holding weekly live streams. But with that, I wish you all the best in writing better group characters.